Hey guys, welcome to Karenology. You won't believe how far some people will go to cause trouble.
When I first moved into Greenfield Acres, I thought I had found paradise. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets were lined with tall oaks, and the houses exuded a warm, suburban charm. For a single father like me, it seemed like the perfect place to raise my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. I had scraped together my savings to buy this house, eager to give her a stable life after years of moving around during my military service. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. Lily loved the backyard with its tire swing and the small garden we started planting together. I even managed to make a couple of acquaintances at the monthly community BBQ hosted by the Homeowner Association. That's when I met Karen Hayward, the Homeowner Association president. Karen's smile was as wide as it was insincere. She approached me with a clipboard, introducing herself as the caretaker of community standards. She rattled off rules about mailbox designs, acceptable lawn heights, and garbage bin placement. It felt excessive, but I brushed it off as her being overzealous about maintaining the neighborhood's charm. Then 2 weeks later, the first letter arrived. It was a formal notice from the Homeowner Association accusing me of violating their landscaping standards. According to the letter, my front lawn didn't meet their aesthetic requirements. Specifically, my newly planted rose bushes clashed with the approved neighborhood color palette. The fine was $250. I was dumbfounded. Rose bushes? Really? Still, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I called the Homeowner Association office, but the person on the other end was dismissive and told me to consult the handbook. Frustrated but determined to keep the peace, I replanted the roses in the backyard and paid the fine. That was only the beginning. One morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery rumbling outside. Peering through the window, I saw a large truck backing onto my property. Workers began dumping concrete debris and scrap metal right in the middle of my backyard. Furious, I ran outside to confront them. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted. A burly man in a hard hat shrugged. "Orders from Apex Builders. This is designated storage for our project on Maple Street." "This is my property. Get that junk off my land now." He smirked. "Take it up with the Homeowner Association. We're just following instructions." I stormed over to Karen's house. She answered the door, her ever-present clipboard in hand. "John, how lovely to see you. Is there a problem?" she asked, feigning concern. "A huge problem," I snapped. "Apex Builders is dumping construction waste in my yard. They said it was authorized by the Homeowner Association." Karen's smile tightened. "Oh, that. It's a temporary measure. The Homeowner Association approved it because your property had the most accessible space for the trucks. Don't worry, it'll be cleared in no time. You didn't ask for my permission. Move it now." Her expression turned icy. "I'm afraid that's not how things work. As a member of this community, you're expected to contribute to its improvement. If you have an issue, feel free to file a formal complaint." I left her porch fuming. That night, I took photos of the debris and started researching local property laws. It didn't take long to realize that what the Homeowner Association had done was blatantly illegal. The next day, I sent a certified letter to both the Homeowner Association and Apex Builders, demanding the immediate removal of the debris and threatening legal action. For a week, nothing happened. Then I received another letter from the Homeowner Association, this time accusing me of failure to maintain proper yard cleanliness and imposing a $500 fine. The audacity was infuriating. Things took a darker turn that weekend. I woke up to find my backyard gate broken and several rose bushes trampled. Someone had spray painted "Rules are rules" across my garage door. It was a clear message. I called the local police, but the officer who showed up seemed reluctant to get involved. "Homeowner associations have a lot of leeway," he said with a shrug. "Maybe try working it out with them directly." Karen's influence, it seemed, extended further than I had imagined. Determined to fight back, I installed security cameras around my property. A few days later, I caught footage of a drone hovering near my backyard. When I reviewed the footage, it was clear the drone had been spying on me. That evening, another homeowner association notice arrived, citing me for unauthorized garden structures and demanding I remove Lily's tire swing. This time, I wasn't going to back down. I began documenting everything: the letters, the fines, the vandalism, and the drone footage. I reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He was shocked by the evidence and agreed to take my case. But Karen wasn't done yet. One evening, as I was reviewing my growing stack of paperwork, there was a loud knock at the door. Two uniformed men claiming to be part of the Homeowner Association Enforcement Patrol stood on my porch. "We're here to inspect your property for compliance," one of them said. I crossed my arms. "Not without a warrant, you're not." They exchanged glances before one muttered, "This isn't over." That night, I noticed something strange. A stack of documents sticking out of my mailbox. They weren't homeowner association notices, but something much more sinister. It was a contract, one that falsely claimed I had sold a portion of my property to Apex Builders. The signatures were forged, but the document was stamped with the homeowner association's official seal. My heart pounded as I realized the extent of the conspiracy. Karen and Apex Builders were working together to steal my land, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. This was war. The forged contract weighed heavily in my hands as I stood in my dimly lit kitchen, my mind racing with the implications. This wasn't just about petty fines or neighborhood rules anymore. Karen and her allies were attempting to steal my land outright. I spent the rest of the night meticulously scanning and copying every document I had collected, ensuring I had a backup of every piece of evidence. Whatever was coming next, I needed to be prepared. The following morning, I contacted my lawyer, Mark Bennett, and met him at his downtown office. Mark was a no-nonsense man in his 50s with a reputation for taking on powerful organizations. As I handed him the forged contract, his expression darkened. "This is blatant fraud," he said, flipping through the pages. "The signatures don't even match. And this homeowner association seal, they've definitely overstepped their legal authority. We'll file an injunction to block any further actions on your property while we investigate." Mark's confidence was reassuring, but I knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. She had too much at stake. Later that week, I attended an emergency homeowner association meeting called to address recent conflicts in the neighborhood. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the entrance of Greenfield Acres. When I arrived, the room was packed with residents, many of whom cast nervous glances my way. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand, her demeanor exuding authority. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "Unfortunately, we've encountered some resistance to our efforts to maintain the integrity of our community. Certain individuals," she glanced pointedly at me, "seem to believe they are above the rules." I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Karen, but I think we should talk about the unauthorized use of my property by Apex Builders. And while we're at it, maybe you can explain this forged contract I received with your seal on it?" The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's smile faltered for a moment before she regained her composure. "Mr. Larson, those are serious accusations. If you have concerns, you should address them through the proper channels." "I have," I shot back. "You've ignored every letter I've sent. Now I'm taking it to the community." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This meeting is not the place for baseless allegations. Moving on." But the damage was done. Several residents began asking questions about Apex Builders and the homeowner association's actions, forcing Karen to deflect and evade. It was clear I wasn't the only one unhappy with her leadership. The next day, I returned home to find two men in suits waiting on my porch. One introduced himself as Richard Crane, a representative from Apex Builders. His partner, a stern-looking man, remained silent. "Mr. Larson," Crane began, his tone oily and condescending, "we've come to discuss an opportunity regarding your property. Apex Builders is prepared to offer you a generous sum in exchange for a portion of your land. It's a win-win." "I'm not interested," I said firmly. "And you can tell Karen and the homeowner association to stop harassing me." Crane's smile faded. "I'd advise you to reconsider. Things could become complicated if you refuse to cooperate." "Was that a threat?" I asked, stepping closer. The silent man tensed, but Crane held up a hand. "Not at all," he said smoothly. "Just a friendly suggestion." I watched them leave, and anger boiling in my chest. It was clear they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted, but neither would I. That night, I heard a loud crash outside. Grabbing a flashlight, I ran to the backyard and found my garden fence smashed to pieces. My security cameras caught footage of a group of masked individuals with bats, but their faces were obscured. I called the police again, but as before, they seemed reluctant to take action. "This is just vandalism," the officer said. "Without clear IDs, there's not much we can do." "It's harassment," I argued, "and it's escalating." The officer shrugged. "File a report and keep your cameras running." Frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed additional cameras and reinforced the fences, determined not to be intimidated. Meanwhile, Mark filed the injunction and began digging into the homeowner association's finances. What he found was both shocking and infuriating. Mark called me into his office 2 days later. He laid a folder on the desk, filled with spreadsheets and bank statements. The homeowner association's been siphoning funds for years, he explained. Karen's been funneling money to Apex Builders under the guise of community improvement projects. They've essentially been using residents' dues to finance private developments. And no one noticed, I asked, stunned. Most homeowner associations operate with little oversight. Karen's been careful to keep it under wraps. But this is damning evidence. If we present this in court, we can dismantle her entire operation. It was a glimmer of hope, but I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. Karen wouldn't go down without a fight, and Apex Builders had deep pockets and plenty of influence. As I left Mark's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Karen and her cronies had underestimated me. They thought they could bully me into submission, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The discovery of Karen's financial schemes gave me a surge of hope, but also a grim realization. We were dealing with more than just petty homeowner association politics. This was organized fraud, and Karen wasn't working alone. Apex Builders had its fingerprints all over the homeowner association's shady dealings, and I knew that bringing them down would take more than just documentation. It would require courage and persistence. Mark advised me to hold a community meeting to share what we had uncovered. Together, we rented a small hall at the local library and invited as many residents as we could. To my surprise, over 24 people showed up. Most were frustrated homeowners who had endured years of arbitrary fines and harassment from the homeowner association. As I stood before them, I laid out everything: the forged documents, the unauthorized use of my property, and the misappropriation of homeowner association funds. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as I passed around copies of the evidence. Karen and Apex Builders have been exploiting all of us, I said, my voice steady but firm. This isn't just about me. It's about standing up for our rights as homeowners. Together, we can fight back. A man in the back, Peter, stood up. My driveway was torn up last year for a repair project that never happened. They fined me when I refused to pay for it. Another woman added, they shut down our neighborhood park, claiming it needed renovations. But now it's an Apex Builder storage lot. The anger in the room was palpable. We agreed to form a coalition and take collective action. Karen's reign of terror was about to face a united front. 2 days later, I woke to find an official-looking notice taped to my front door. It was a cease and desist letter from Apex Builders, threatening legal action if I continued to spread false and defamatory claims. Attached was a demand for $10,000 in damages. It was an intimidation tactic, plain and simple. I showed the letter to Mark, who dismissed it with a scoff. They're bluffing. They know their position is weak, but they're trying to scare you into silence. Don't back down. That evening, as I reviewed my notes, my security cameras alerted me to movement in the backyard. I rushed outside with a flashlight and found a man in a hoodie tampering with my cameras. He fled before I could catch him, but the damage was done. Several cameras were smashed and wires were cut. It was clear Karen and Apex Builders were escalating their tactics. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from someone claiming to be a former homeowner association board member. He introduced himself as Greg and insisted on meeting in person. Cautiously, I agreed, choosing a busy coffee shop as the location. Greg was a nervous man in his 40s, glancing over his shoulder as he spoke. I resigned from the board last year when I realized what Karen was doing. She's been funneling money to Apex Builders for years, using fake invoices and bogus projects. Anyone who questioned her got pushed out. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I've seen what she's capable of, he replied, and I'm tired of being silent. I have records, emails, financial statements. They prove everything. My pulse quickened. Can you share them? Greg nodded. I'll send you copies, but be careful. Karen's not above playing dirty. With Greg's evidence in hand, Mark filed a formal lawsuit against Karen and the homeowner association, accusing them of fraud, harassment, and breach of fiduciary duty. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Word spread quickly, and more residents came forward with their own stories of abuse and intimidation. Karen, predictably, called an emergency homeowner association meeting. I attended, along with several other coalition members. Karen's demeanor was colder than ever as she addressed the group. These baseless accusations are a smear campaign, she declared. I have always acted in the best interests of this community. Anyone who thinks otherwise is free to leave. I stood up. We're not leaving, Karen. We're holding you accountable. The tension in the room was electric. Karen glared at me, but for the first time, she looked uncertain. That night, as I reviewed the latest batch of evidence from Greg, I noticed something alarming, a pattern of payments from Apex builders to a local law enforcement fund. The amounts were significant, suggesting a level of influence that explained the police's reluctance to intervene in my complaints. Before I could process the implications, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, anger and determination rising in equal measure. If Karen and Apex builders thought threats would scare me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The text message lingered in my mind, a stark reminder of how high the stakes had become. Karen and Apex builders weren't just exploiting the homeowner association system, they were actively intimidating anyone who stood in their way. But their threats only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't backing down. The next day, I called a meeting with the coalition members at my house. The group had grown to nearly 40 people, a mix of frustrated homeowners and former homeowner association members who had grown tired of Karen's tyranny. As they crowded into my living room, I shared the latest evidence from Greg and the ominous text message. This is what we're up against, I said, holding up my phone. But we have the truth on our side. If we keep pushing, they won't be able to hide. Peter, the man whose driveway had been destroyed, nodded. We've already let them take too much. It's time to fight back. We devised a plan to escalate our efforts. Mark filed an additional complaint with the state's attorney general, citing the new evidence of financial misconduct and the payments to local law enforcement. Meanwhile, the coalition members began spreading the word, rallying more neighbors to join our cause. A few days later, I was surprised to see a patrol car pull into my driveway. The sheriff, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped out and approached me. Mr. Larson, I'm Sheriff Willis, he said, extending a hand. I wanted to talk to you about the complaints you've been filing. I crossed my arms, wary. Is there a problem, Sheriff? He sighed. Let's just say there's been some pressure to let this matter go. But I've seen enough to know something isn't right. If you've got evidence, I'm willing to take a closer look. His offer caught me off guard. I invited him inside and laid out everything. The forged documents, the financial records, and the intimidation tactics. As he flipped through the papers, his expression hardened. This goes deeper than I thought, he said. I'll start an investigation. But you need to be careful. These people clearly aren't afraid to play dirty. I'm not afraid, I replied, my voice steady. But I appreciate the warning. The next homeowner association meeting was a spectacle. Karen had clearly caught wind of our growing coalition, and she was desperate to regain control. She stood at the front of the room, her usual smug confidence replaced with thinly veiled hostility. It has come to my attention that certain individuals are spreading false information and inciting division within our community, she began, glaring in my direction. I want to remind everyone that the homeowner association exists to protect our neighborhood's integrity, and baseless accusations only harm us all. I stood up. The only thing harming this community is your corruption, Karen. We have evidence of your fraud, your deals with Apex builders, and your misuse of homeowner association funds. You can't bully us into silence anymore. The room erupted into chaos. Residents began shouting questions and accusations, their frustration boiling over. Karen tried to regain control, but her grip was slipping. For the first time, it felt like the tide was turning. That night, as I returned home, I noticed a black SUV parked a few houses down. Its windows were tinted, and it didn't belong to any of my neighbors. I felt a prickle of unease but tried to brush it off. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of breaking glass. I grabbed a baseball bat and rushed downstairs to find a rock had been thrown through my living room window. Attached to it was a note. Last warning. I called the sheriff, who arrived within minutes. Sheriff Willis examined the note and the footage from my security cameras, which had captured the SUV speeding away. This is intimidation, plain and simple, he said. I'll station a patrol car in the area for the next few nights. But you should consider staying somewhere else for a while. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. This is my home, and I won't be driven out. Despite the escalating threats, the coalition continued its work. One of the members, a tech-savvy college student named Emily, managed to trace the homeowner association's financial transactions to an offshore account linked to Apex Builders. The evidence was damning, and Mark wasted no time adding it to the growing legal case. Meanwhile, more neighbors came forward with their stories. One elderly couple revealed that they had been pressured to sell their home at a fraction of its value, only for Apex Builders to flip it for a massive profit. Their testimony added another layer to the mounting case against Karen and her co-conspirators. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest developments with Mark, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a video clip sent from an unknown number. The footage showed Lily playing in the backyard earlier that day, oblivious to the drone hovering above her. My blood ran cold. The message that followed was simple: back off or she'll be next. I clenched my fists, fury and fear swirling inside me. This had gone far beyond property disputes and legal battles. Karen and her allies had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure they paid for it, no matter what it took. The chilling video of Lily playing in the backyard haunted me. Karen and her accomplices had shown they were willing to cross any line, even targeting my daughter. The fear I felt quickly morphed into a fiery resolve. This was no longer just about protecting my property. It was about protecting my family. The next morning, I met with Mark and Sheriff Willis. I showed them the video and the accompanying threat. "This isn't just harassment anymore," Willis said, his jaw tight. "This is criminal intimidation, and it puts your daughter's safety at risk. We'll start an investigation immediately." "That's not enough," and I said. "I want a restraining order against Karen and anyone affiliated with Apex Builders. They've made this personal." Mark nodded. "We'll file it today. In the meantime, we need to tighten security around your home. Cameras, motion sensors, whatever it takes." I agreed, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't stop them. Karen and her cronies were desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. Word of the threat against Lily spread quickly through the neighborhood. The coalition grew stronger as more residents joined our cause, outraged by the lengths to which the homeowner association was willing to go. Emily, the tech-savvy student, set up a secure online platform where members could share updates and evidence anonymously. "We need to stay one step ahead of them," she said during our next meeting. "If we're united, they can't intimidate us all." Peter added, "We should hold a press conference. Let the media know what's happening here. If we shine a spotlight on Karen and Apex Builders, they'll have nowhere to hide." The idea was risky, but it had merit. Exposing their actions publicly could force Karen's hand and bring more scrutiny to their operations. The day after the press conference was announced, I received a court summons. Karen and the homeowner association were suing me for defamation, claiming my accusations had caused irreparable harm to their reputation. It was a calculated move designed to drain my resources and divert attention from the real issues. Mark wasn't fazed. "This is a classic SLAP lawsuit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're trying to silence you through legal intimidation. We'll file a countersuit and request it be dismissed." Despite his confidence, the lawsuit added another layer of stress. I couldn't help but wonder how far Karen was willing to go to protect her empire. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of an alarm blaring. I grabbed my baseball bat and rushed outside to find flames licking at the edge of my fence. Someone had set fire to a pile of debris, and the fire was spreading quickly. I grabbed the garden hose and managed to douse the flames before they reached the house, but the message was clear. Sheriff Willis arrived shortly after. "This is arson," he said grimly. "We'll collect evidence, but I'm betting it ties back to Apex Builders." I nodded, my hands still shaking. "They're escalating. If we don't stop them soon, someone's going to get hurt." The next day, I received an unexpected call from a whistleblower inside Apex Builders. The man who refused to give his name claimed to have insider knowledge of Karen's dealings. "I've been part of this long enough to know it's wrong," he said. "I have documents that prove everything. Bribes, kickbacks, even plans to take over more properties. But if Karen finds out I've spoken to you, I'm done for." "Can you send me the documents?" I asked. "I'll drop them at a safe location. Check the old mailbox at the park tonight." That evening, I retrieved a thick envelope from the designated spot. Inside were pages of incriminating evidence, proof that Karen and Apex Builders had been colluding for years to defraud homeowners and profit off illegal land deals. As I reviewed the documents, my phone buzzed with another text. "We know what you have. If you don't hand it over, you'll regret it." This time, I didn't feel fear. I felt rage. Karen and her accomplices had terrorized me and my family for too long. With the evidence in hand and the coalition behind me, I was ready to take the fight to them. But I knew the next move would be theirs, and it would be their most desperate one yet. The evidence from the whistleblower was explosive. Pages of documents detailed years of fraud, including falsified property deeds, illegal transfers, and bribes to local officials. It was the smoking gun we needed to bring Karen and Apex Builders to justice. But it also put me and the coalition in even greater danger. Mark and I worked through the night to organize the documents. By morning, we had a plan: deliver copies to the state attorney general, share them with the press, and ensure multiple backups were stored securely. The coalition rallied behind the effort, each member taking on specific tasks to spread the word and increase visibility. If Karen wanted to silence us, she'd have to fight the entire neighborhood. The morning after the documents went public, Karen's response was swift and brutal. Residents woke up to find threatening letters slipped under their doors, warning them to withdraw their support for the coalition or face fines, foreclosure, or worse. My security cameras captured a group of masked individuals vandalizing coalition members' homes, spray painting threats like "stay in line" and "obey homeowner association rules." Sheriff Willis doubled patrols in the area and promised swift action, but the tension was palpable. Karen's desperation was pushing her to increasingly reckless behavior, and we all knew the situation could explode at any moment. The coalition's efforts culminated in a court hearing to address the lawsuit Karen had filed against me. The courtroom was packed with residents, reporters, and legal representatives from both sides. Karen's lawyer attempted to paint me as a troublemaker who was spreading baseless accusations, but Mark was ready. He presented the whistleblower's documents as evidence, systematically dismantling Karen's case. Emails, financial statements, and recorded conversations painted a damning picture of corruption and abuse of power. The judge seemed visibly disturbed by the depth of the fraud. Karen, seated at the defendant's table, looked less composed than usual. For the first time, cracks were visible in her polished exterior. When Mark presented evidence of her personal financial gains from Apex Builders' illegal activities, the courtroom erupted in whispers. That night, I received another text message. "The documents won't save you. Last warning." Moments later, the power to my house went out, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. I quickly lit candles and checked on Lily, who was fast asleep. My phone buzzed with a call from Peter. "They've cut power to the whole block," he said. "Several of us saw men messing with the transformer box. They're trying to scare us." I called Sheriff Willis, who arrived with deputies to secure the area. They found tampered electrical equipment, but no sign of the culprits. The sheriff pulled me aside. "They're getting desperate. Be ready for anything." Despite the harassment, the coalition pressed forward. Emily set up an encrypted online archive of the whistleblower's documents, ensuring they couldn't be destroyed or hidden. We also worked with a local journalist who ran a detailed expose on Karen and Apex Builders. The story gained traction, putting even more pressure on the homeowner association. Karen's allies began to distance themselves from her, sensing the tide was turning. Apex Builders' CEO released a public statement denying involvement, but the evidence told a different story. The community's unity was finally paying off. One evening, as I reviewed the latest legal filings with Mark, I heard a loud knock at the door. When I opened it, I found a man in a dark suit standing on my porch. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "This is a matter of life and death. Read it carefully." Inside was a letter detailing a new layer to the conspiracy, one that implicated not just Karen and Apex Builders, but a powerful local politician who had been facilitating their schemes. The stakes had just been raised, and the battle was far from over. The letter in the envelope revealed connections I hadn't imagined. Karen and Apex Builders weren't just acting alone. They had the backing of Councilman Edgar Price, a prominent local politician with a reputation for being untouchable. The documents showed years of quid pro quo deals, rezoning approvals in exchange for campaign contributions, public land sales at cut-rate prices, and a network of shell companies that funneled illicit profits back to Price and his allies. Mark and I immediately called an emergency coalition meeting. The room buzzed with tension as I explained the new revelations. "This goes beyond the homeowner association," I said. "We're up against a corrupt political machine. But this also means we have more leverage. If we expose this, we can bring down not just Karen, but everyone protecting her." Emily was already typing furiously on her laptop. "I'll start digging into Councilman Price's financial records and campaign filings. If there's more dirt, we'll find it." The coalition's determination paid off. Over the next few days, Emily uncovered additional evidence linking Price to Apex Builders. Leaked emails revealed direct communications between Karen and Price's office, coordinating efforts to silence dissent and push through fraudulent property deals. The evidence was damning, and even some of Karen's staunchest allies began to turn on her. At the same time, the coalition's press coverage gained national attention. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a classic David versus Goliath battle between ordinary homeowners and a corrupt system. Karen's image as a domineering homeowner association president was being dismantled piece by piece. One evening as I returned home, I noticed a car idling at the end of my street. The driver, a shadowy figure, appeared to be watching my house. The unease I felt turned to alarm when I found another note taped to my door. "Stop digging, or you won't like what happens next." I called Sheriff Willis immediately. He promised to increase patrols in the area, but warned me to stay vigilant. "This isn't just about intimidation anymore," he said. "If Price feels threatened, he might take drastic measures. Watch your back." With the threat level escalating, Mark filed a formal complaint with the State Ethics Commission, outlining the collusion between Price, Karen, and Apex Builders. Meanwhile, Emily coordinated with investigative journalists, ensuring the evidence was broadcast widely. The more eyes on the story, the harder it would be for Price and his cronies to cover their tracks. The pressure began to mount. Karen stopped attending homeowner association meetings, and her house became eerily quiet. Apex Builders pulled workers from neighborhood projects, and rumors swirled that Price's office was scrambling to control the narrative. For the first time, it felt like the tide was truly turning in our favor. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Early one morning, I awoke to the sound of sirens and flashing lights outside Karen's house. Federal agents swarmed the property, carrying out boxes of documents and computer equipment. News quickly spread that the FBI had launched a corruption probe, targeting Price, Karen, and Apex Builders. Mark called me later that day. "The Ethics Commission tipped them off," he explained. "This is bigger than we imagined. They're looking at money laundering, racketeering, the whole 9 yards." The news electrified the coalition. Residents who had been too afraid to speak out now came forward with their stories, adding more fuel to the investigation. It felt like justice was finally within reach. As I celebrated the raid with the coalition, my phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "You think it's over? It's not. Watch your back." My triumph was tempered by the reminder that the fight wasn't over. Karen and her allies might have been exposed, but desperate people often took desperate actions. The question now wasn't if they'd retaliate, but how. Despite the FBI's raid and the growing public attention, the threats against me and the coalition didn't stop. If anything, they became more insidious. The anonymous messages continued, now laced with specific warnings about coalition members and their families. The sense of unease hung over all of us like a storm cloud. One night, Peter called in a panic. His car had been torched in his driveway. The arsonist left no clues, but the message was clear. Karen and her allies were still fighting back. Sheriff Willis assured us that an investigation was underway, but we all knew how slow justice could be. The coalition's response was to double down. We organized round-the-clock patrols of the neighborhood, pairing up residents to watch for suspicious activity. Emily enhanced our online security measures, creating encrypted communication channels to protect sensitive information. At the same time, Mark pressed forward with additional legal filings, ensuring the evidence against Karen, Apex Builders, and Councilman Price remained front and center. The support from the broader community was overwhelming. Neighbors who had been silent before now offered assistance, volunteering time, resources, and even money to help with legal fees. The tide of public opinion was undeniably on our side, and that momentum gave us strength. Just as we started to feel a glimmer of hope, Karen struck back with her most audacious move yet. A special homeowner association meeting was called, and notices were sent to every resident, promising a vote on critical community issues. The coalition suspected a trap but decided to attend in force. When we arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Karen, flanked by a small group of loyalists, stood at the front of the room. Her usual smug confidence was replaced by a veneer of desperation. "This meeting is to address the chaos and division caused by certain individuals," she began, glaring at me. "For the good of the community, I am proposing a vote to remove these agitators from the homeowner association and bar them from attending future meetings. The room erupted in chaos. Coalition members shouted in protest, while Karen's supporters clapped and cheered. Mark quickly stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "This is an illegal motion," he declared. "You cannot bar property owners from participating in the homeowner association. Any such vote is null and void." Karen's smile was razor thin. "We'll see about that." The vote proceeded despite our objections. And unsurprisingly, Karen's motion passed with the support of her dwindling loyalists. But we knew it wouldn't hold up in court. The real damage was in the spectacle. Karen had managed to sow even more division in the community. The next day I received a call from an unlikely source, a junior staffer from Councilman Price's office. She claimed to have information that could dismantle Price's political career, but wanted assurances of anonymity. We met in a secluded park after dark. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, handed me a USB drive. "This contains emails and financial records showing Price's direct involvement in the fraud," she explained. "I've seen what he's done to people who cross him, so I can't be involved further. Just use it wisely." The drive contained exactly what she promised. Mark reviewed the files and confirmed they were enough to implicate Price in not only homeowner association-related fraud, but also larger-scale corruption involving city contracts and illegal zoning changes. With the new evidence, we were ready to escalate the fight. But as I prepared to leave Mark's office that evening, my phone buzzed with a chilling message. "You were warned. Time's up." Minutes later, a loud explosion shook the building. Rushing outside, we saw smoke rising from my car in the parking lot. The threat had just turned deadly, and I knew the final showdown was near. The explosion rattled more than just my nerves. It sent a clear message that Karen and her allies were willing to cross any line to silence us. As I watched the smoldering remains of my car, Mark grabbed my shoulder. "This isn't just intimidation anymore," he said grimly. "This is an act of terror. We need to involve federal authorities." Within hours, the FBI was looped into the investigation. They secured the area, gathered evidence, and took statements from witnesses. Sheriff Willis, visibly shaken, promised to coordinate efforts with the federal agents. The coalition members rallied around me, offering their unwavering support despite the danger. The attack on my car had an unintended consequence. It galvanized the public. News outlets across the country picked up the story, painting Karen and her associates as dangerous criminals. The additional scrutiny amplified the pressure on Councilman Price, whose office released a desperate statement denying all allegations. Meanwhile, Emily's online efforts paid off. She leaked portions of the USB drive's contents to trusted journalists, exposing Price's extensive corruption. Headlines screamed about kickbacks, fraudulent zoning approvals, and his connections to Apex builders. The backlash was immediate, with calls for his resignation flooding City Hall. Karen, however, remained defiant. Despite her dwindling support, she called another emergency homeowner association meeting. The coalition members were ready, but we knew this could be her final attempt to solidify her power. The meeting was held in the largest hall in the neighborhood, packed to capacity with residents, reporters, and even federal agents observing from the back. Karen, dressed in her usual power suit, stood at the podium, her voice dripping with false confidence. "These baseless accusations have gone on long enough," she declared. "Our community's reputation is being destroyed by a few troublemakers who have no respect for the rules." I stood up. "The only thing destroying this community is your corruption, Karen. The FBI raid, the documents, the threats. It's all on you." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's composure cracked as I walked to the front, holding up a copy of the latest evidence from the USB drive. "This isn't just about an homeowner association," I continued. "This is about fraud, intimidation, and abuse of power, and it ends now." The federal agents stepped forward, announcing they had sufficient evidence to arrest Karen on charges of fraud and conspiracy. Gasps filled the room as she was handcuffed and led away. The sight of her downfall was met with both relief and disbelief among the residents. With Karen out of the picture, the homeowner association was left in disarray. The coalition worked tirelessly to reorganize the association, electing new leadership that prioritized transparency and fairness. Apex Builders' operations in the area came to a screeching halt, and lawsuits were filed to recover stolen funds and reverse fraudulent property deals. Councilman Price, facing mounting evidence and public outrage, resigned in disgrace. His legal battles were just beginning, but his political career was over. The community's efforts had exposed a web of corruption that extended far beyond Greenfield Acres, setting a precedent for holding powerful figures accountable. As life in the neighborhood began to stabilize, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper that read, "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." Though Karen and her immediate allies were defeated, the note reminded me that there were still those who thrived in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. The fight for justice wasn't over yet. In the weeks following Karen's arrest and Councilman Price's resignation, Greenfield Acres began to heal. The coalition transformed into a neighborhood council dedicated to ensuring transparency and fairness in the homeowner association's future. For the first time in years, the community felt united. An emergency election was held to replace the homeowner association leadership. Peter, a longtime resident and vocal member of the coalition, was elected president. His first act was to abolish the arbitrary rules and fines Karen had enforced, replacing them with fair, community-approved regulations. Emily was appointed as the council's tech advisor, ensuring the homeowner association's finances and decisions were openly accessible to all residents. Mark continued to guide us through the legal cleanup, filing additional lawsuits to recover funds stolen by Karen and Apex Builders. Settlements were reached, and compensation was distributed to those who had suffered the most under the previous regime. Though Karen and Price were facing lengthy legal battles, the note I received lingered in my mind. It was a reminder that corruption often has deep roots, and removing one layer doesn't always expose the full extent of the rot. I shared the note with Sheriff Willis, who promised to keep an eye on any lingering threats. Meanwhile, Apex Builders' CEO publicly denied involvement in the conspiracy, but evidence from the FBI investigation suggested otherwise. Federal agents were expanding their probe, and rumors swirled that more arrests were imminent. The fight wasn't over, but for now, Greenfield Acres was safe. With Karen gone, life in the neighborhood began to feel normal again. Lily's laughter returned to the backyard as she played on her tire swing, and I finally had the peace of mind to focus on my family. The neighbors, once divided by Karen's manipulations, started hosting regular block parties and working together to repair the damage caused by years of neglect. One evening, as the sun set over the newly renovated park, Peter raised a toast during a community gathering. "To resilience," he said, "to standing up for what's right, no matter the odds." The crowd erupted in cheers, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. But just as I thought the chapter was closed, I received another letter in the mail. This time, it wasn't a threat, but a legal notice. It claimed that a mysterious third party had purchased Apex Builders' remaining assets and intended to revive their projects in the area. The name on the notice was unfamiliar, but the intent was clear. The battle wasn't over. As I stared at the letter, a mix of frustration and determination surged through me. The community had come too far to let another shadowy figure take root in our lives. I picked up my phone and called Mark. "Looks like we're not done yet," I said. His response was steady. "Then let's get to work." The war for Greenfield Acres might not have been over, but now we were ready for anything.